Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, August 17th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the electoral implications and how the 2021 governor elections could very well shape the 2022 midterm elections in just a few steps. Now, I got this idea for this video reading over this article from Politico California where they talked about how the Democratic Party was practically stunned by the prospect of losing their two biggest governors within just weeks of each other, with Andrew Cuomo announcing that he is going to be resigning from the governorship of the state of New York, then to Gavin Newsom from California, who has a pretty good shot at being recalled by the citizens there. When I say good, I'm talking about for California's electorate, for a Democrat in California. Obviously, the chances are going to be classified as good, even if they are not necessarily above 50%. But a 30% chance of being recalled as a Democrat from California, yeah, that's a pretty good chance that you're going to be out of office. So looking at the article itself, I mentioned a number of major points that I do want to highlight through a further in-depth analysis about special elections and moral victories and what could actually shape the 2022 midterms with just 3 elections that are practically right around the corner. Currently, we have 27 Republican governors and 23 Democratic governors, and you can see them all on this map. In fact, why use it on Wikipedia when I have it here on YPMS, where you can look at the United States governors by individual state. Now, I know it might be a little bit weird seeing a Republican from Massachusetts or Vermont or New Hampshire, but understand these are more liberal Republicans, as the Democrats from Louisiana, Kentucky, and Kansas lean towards the right a little bit more, especially when it comes down to Louisiana. But all in all, these pretty much split down party line, which is why it would be very surprising to see a Democrat lose in a state such as California, or a Democrat to be out of office in a state such as New York, or Democrats to lose in the upcoming 2 regularly scheduled governor elections in Virginia and New Jersey. Because this is how our map looks today, and I want to show you what it would look like if Republicans were able to win all 3 of those states. So of course, California would be the most notable change in red on the map, but this is how it would end up looking. It would go from 27 to 23 to 30 to 20, effectively bringing the Democrats down to a position where they near their low point, as they were in 2014 when they held just 17 governorships. I kid you not, just 17 for the Democrats. Fast forward to 2018, they win 23. So looking at this map, it's right around the middle between 2014 and 2018, but it's not good for Democrats. For them to have lost in California, Virginia, and New Jersey, that only indicates that further they would lose in a couple of other swing states. I mean, can you imagine if Democrats were to actually lose these 3 races? And keep in mind, in 2009, Republicans won both Virginia and New Jersey. In 2013, they won both they won New Jersey, did not win Virginia. Then 2017, the Democrats won back both. But looking at these 2 states, they have had a history where Republicans have gotten lucky. And if Republicans are able to get elected in Massachusetts or Maryland, it can very well happen in New Jersey if just the right Republican decides to run. While it doesn't look likely at all that Phil Murphy, he seems to be in a position where he's very powerful in New Jersey, a Republican winning in Virginia wouldn't be the most shocking thing to happen this year. So Virginia and New Jersey, while not necessarily 100% in play or likely to go to the GOP, it's not entirely out of the question. But looking at California, the fact is that this recall effort has gained plenty of momentum, and now is the opportunity for Republicans to pretty much get rid of Gavin Newsom and replace him with a Republican. Now, these 3 victories would pretty much indicate future victories down the line in states such as Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, states such as Nevada, Colorado, Kansas, Maine. Can you imagine what it would be looking after 2022 if that type of momentum was maintained and kept up throughout the next year and a half? But obviously, that is just what seems to be a pipe dream at this point that Republicans win here. But I do want to just explore it further to talk about, what this meant back in 2017 when Democrats had some, not necessarily victories, but moral victories, and how even if the Republican Party doesn't win the governorship, let's say, for instance, that they win maybe Virginia, but don't win California. Just the fact that California narrowed up, and a narrow victory in Virginia, and a narrowing up of New Jersey would be enough to carry these moral victories and translate them into regular victories. And I'll show you exactly what I mean, with an example being the 2017 special elections that occurred for the 115th Congress. Now, they have a list of every single one of these special elections dating from early on in April 2017 all the way through November of 2018. Now, we're not going to be focusing heavily on any of the elections that were held on November of 2018. That was midterm election day. Turnout was very high for the Democratic Party, so all around it looked really good for Democrats. So I'm not going to say that this is something that would be a fair comparison compared to these special elections where the circumstances weren't exactly the same. But you can see here that in all of these special elections, only 2 of them were actually flips before the midterm elections actually occurred. But there were these things called moral victories, where the Democratic Party was able to not necessarily win the election, but get much, much narrower and indicate that some of these races would be much more competitive in the upcoming midterms. For instance, I remember before this channel was even created, I was refreshing the New York Times page for the Kansas 4th Congressional District race. It was won by Ron Estes by 6 points. But the Republican before, Mike Pompeo, who actually served in the Trump administration, won that election by 31 points previously, from 6 to 31. Then Montana's race came. Republicans won by 6 points after previously winning by 15. Fast forward to Georgia's 6th district, and I also do want to point out that this 34th district here, this special election was not between a Democrat and a Republican. I'm not trying to ignore the race because it does look like it narrowed up. That is in fact not the case. It was between a Democrat and a Democrat. That's why the margin was narrower there. But looking at Georgia's 6th, a recognizable name, Jon Ossoff, lost this race to Karen Handel by 4 points after Tom Price had won it by 24 points back in 2016. On that same day, South Carolina held the 5th district race in which Archie Parnell came very close to defeating Ralph Norman in this race, who actually won by 3 points after the Republican previously won by 20. And you can start to see a trend here that a lot of these victories, for the GOP, did go by much narrower amounts than normal. Much narrower amounts. And then fast forward to 2018, you saw how the GOP was obliterated in numerous competitive House seats, how they lost the majority, after 8 years of holding it. So these moral victories eventually translated into actual victories. For instance, the Alabama special election in which Doug Jones was able to win by 2 points. This would be comparable to the Gavin Newsom recall effort in California. It proved that the opposition party could win in even the safest states, and it inspires a crowd well beyond what a normal type of victory would, what a normal type of margin would be. If a Democrat was to win in a competitive race in Colorado in a special election, he would not nearly be as energized as if a Democrat won in Alabama, or if a Republican was able to win in a state such as New Hampshire. But, you would be much more energized if a Republican was able to win in a state such as California, for instance. And that's exactly how this is starting to unfold. That if Republicans are able to win, that will be their Doug Jones type moment. And I can tell you now that this victory for Doug Jones was a main reason as to why Democrats continued to organize, continued to advocate, continued to campaign heavily, because all of these moral victories, while sure indicated that races would be significantly narrowed up, never translated into actual victories until this United States Senate race in Alabama. That was very good for the Democratic Party. A huge victory, one that was celebrated for a very extensive period of time. And it wasn't just a Senate election that these moral victories eventually translated into actual victories. Pennsylvania's 18th district, in which Conor Lamb, now running for United States Senate in 2022, won this race after the Republican previously in 2016 ran unopposed. In fact, Donald Trump won this district by 20 points 2 years prior to this election. Less than 2 years, actually, prior to this election. So you can see here that Conor Lamb was able to flip a ruby red district from red to blue, and that was monumental for Democrats. All of these special elections with narrowed up races led up to these moments for Democrats, as these potential governorships very well could. Because the impact of momentum is something that needs to be discussed. Moral victories led to real ones in both 2017 and 2018. Now, the good thing so far for Democrats is that looking at the special elections, Republicans actually haven't had many moral victories. The only one you could really try to argue was the Texas 6th district race, in which Democrats were completely locked out of the runoff election. Besides that, Democrats actually had pretty good showings earlier on this year. They flipped the United States Senate from red to blue, winning both of Georgia's Senate seats. The rest of these special elections, Democrats were able to do well. So looking at some of these elections that have occurred so far, Democrats have actually defied expectations and defied historical precedent and done better in many of these special elections than they had in the past. Or at least the GOP isn't performing as good as the Democratic Party did back in 2017. But these governor elections could be that first showing, with Joe Biden's approval rating dropping across the nation amidst Afghanistan, COVID-19 resurgence, a lot of things happening across the nation. Democrats are probably in a worse position now than they were a month ago. And this allows Republicans to take advantage of such an opportunity. Looking at the recall effort, while most people do not expect Gavin Newsom to be recalled, the fact that there's nearly a 1 in 4 chance by the betting market odds that Newsom is recalled is quite fascinating. And looking at the Virginia election results in 2020, if Republicans were actually able to win there, it would prove to be very monumental. I mean, looking at the margins in all of these states that I'm talking about, New Jersey, Virginia, and California, all of which were won by Joe Biden by over 10 points. New Jersey was won by over 15. Virginia was won by over 10.1%, so just right above there, but still the largest margin for a Democrat in Virginia since 1944. And then in California, Joe Biden won by 29 points. So what you see here is that New Jersey, Virginia, California, the fact that the Republican Party even has a chance at winning any of those governorships is important to note. And even if they only win the narrowed up races such as California or Virginia, any type of narrowed up margin relative to 2017 or even 2020 will provide Republicans with that energy that will be carried on into 2022. The same way Democrats took the energy from those special elections in 2017 and carried it on to victories at the end of that year and into 2018. So let's take a look at exactly what we would actually start to see. You see, looking at California, the argument that the GOP would be making in this state, even if Newsom survives this recall or not, is that Republicans can do well and win in very solid Democratic states. And think about it, how it looks like from a Republican Party standpoint. You have a governor who won in 2018 in California by over 20 points. And then you fast forward 3 years later through a Republican-incited recall effort, and I say that primarily speaking because most of those signatures were done by and for Republicans, and I'm not trying to tie some type of party to it, but you cannot deny the very big existence of the Republican Party's presence within the recall effort. I mean, quite literally, California Democratic Party is no on recall, Republican Party is yes on recall. But besides that point, the argument that would be made will work very, very well for Republicans across the nation. Look at it from their standpoint. So looking at California, you would be in this position where it is a very solid Democratic state. It's stereotyped as a state that is extremely liberal, as Bernie Sanders-esque, as very progressive, right? So if a Democrat was to lose in California, what does that mean for Republicans? Republicans would argue that this was a repudiation of Democratic governance. That was something that the Political article pointed out, that the GOP, if they can win in California, can win anywhere. I kid you not, winning in California would be just enough momentum to carry Republicans into victories into states such as Kansas, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and make the map more lopsided than it is today. And that would be a huge plus for the GOP. Just one victory in California, or even in Virginia, with California narrowing up to a 4-point, saving recall, saving Newsom effort where they win and keep him in office by 4 points, 6 points, 8 points. No matter what, this recall effort, the fact that it's even happening, is going to give the GOP ammunition to incite their base for 2022. Looking at just how the Democratic Party was able to utilize their losses in 2017. I can't imagine that the GOP wouldn't do the same. The arguments that the Democrats made in 2017 was that we've proven we can narrow up these solid red states, these solid red districts. Arizona's 8th. Republicans won by 38 in 2016. They won by 6 in 2018 in that special election. Republicans won in Georgia by 24, then won by only 4 in that election. In the first ever special election, Republicans won by 31 previously, then won by 6. All around, what you see here is that Democrats are able to take advantage of these special elections, take advantage of these, what they did was took advantage of the special elections and the margins and use that to say, now that we're in competitive districts, let's go ahead and see how it ends up. And in 2018, in these competitive House districts with these special elections, Democrats outperformed by 4 points in New York, by over 20 points in both Pennsylvania districts. You can see here how these moral victories did translate into regular victories. So Republicans can certainly utilize that across the nation. They can say Gavin Newsom is out. Andrew Cuomo is out. Now that Terry McAuliffe loses his race, the energy will be there for the GOP, and they would be foolish to not take advantage of the situation. No matter what, these governor elections, while seemingly inconsequential right now, at least besides California, Virginia, and New Jersey, which aren't really talked about much by members of the mainstream media, deserve some attention. Because no matter what, the GOP is going to try to cling onto everything that they can for the upcoming midterm elections. And if the GOP can even get one victory in any of these 3 states, it will provide them with enough ammunition for the next year to turn out their base, to show and prove that Republicans can win across the nation and that Democrats are falling out of popularity. Because if voters need anything, it's reassurance from political parties that they are making the right decision. If they can prove that Republicans winning in California means that Republicans should be winning across the nation, if California is going red, why isn't Illinois? Why isn't Pennsylvania? Why isn't Oregon? The argument can be made and will resonate with many, many voters, as the Democratic Party utilized under Donald Trump during the beginning of his presidency leading into the midterm elections. So all around, what this is going to do is essentially put the Democrats in an unfortunate position. No matter what, I'm looking at this and I'm going to say, look, regardless of this margin, unless the Democrats can perform how they did in 2020, the GOP will try to spin this in their advantage. Moral victories, while obviously do not translate to House seats, Senate seats, or governorships, they certainly will eventually translate to them in the future. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.